like that.
Well, you got some mail, man's got to read his mail.
It's the same old malarkey. Has to be today.
The Wild West on screen was all swagger, six-shooters, and square-jawed heroes saving the day. But behind the Stetsons and Spurs, some of Hollywood's toughest cowboys were hiding truths that could have destroyed their careers faster than a bullet. Studios buried secrets, arranged marriages, and threatened blackmail to keep their leading men looking straight. What if I told you that some of the most iconic Western stars were living double lives the whole time?
If you agree, then I agree, we all agree together.
1. Ramon Novarro. Ramon Novarro exploded onto silent screens as the rugged star of Ben-Hur in 1925, flexing muscles and driving chariots while audiences swooned worldwide. MGM marketed him as Hollywood's answer to Rudolph Valentino, dripping with exotic Latin masculinity and romantic intensity. But Novarro never married. Nangin studio fixers worked overtime, planting fake romance stories in gossip columns to keep whispers at bay. Behind closed doors, Novarro lived openly among close friends, hosting lavish parties at his Laurel Canyon estate where Hollywood's hidden gay elite gathered freely. He carried on relationships with men throughout his career, including a long romance with journalist Herbert Howe. As talkies arrived, his thick accent limited roles, and by the 1930s, his stardom faded. MGM dropped him, and he transitioned to character work, never recapturing that silent era magic. Tragically, in 1968, two male hustlers murdered Novarro in his home during a robbery gone wrong, a brutal end that exposed the loneliness and vulnerability he'd faced for decades. His death became tabloid fodder, sensationalized and stripped of dignity. Yet his Ben-Hur performance remains a landmark of early cinema.
You can tell me about that later. Where's the Overland Station?
2. Randolph Scott. Randolph Scott practically invented the stoic cowboy archetype, starring in dozens of westerns from the 1930s through the 1960s, with titles like Ride the High Country and The Tall T, cementing his legend. Square-jawed, soft-spoken, and effortlessly masculine, Scott epitomized frontier justice and rugged individualism on screen.
My pride wouldn't let me, so my wife had to take a job.
But for years, he lived with fellow actor Cary Grant in a Santa Monica beach house arrangement Hollywood insiders called one of the industry's worst-kept secrets. The two men shared expenses, vacations, and a domestic life that raised eyebrows across Tinseltown, though studio publicity machines worked furiously to frame it as a bachelor pad situation. Scott eventually married twice, both unions appearing more strategic than passionate, and he rarely spoke about his personal life in interviews. Grant and Scott's relationship remained ambiguous, with biographers still debating whether it was romantic or simply an unconventional friendship between two men navigating brutal studio pressure. Regardless, Scott's Western persona never wavered, and audiences bought every dusty shootout and moral showdown he delivered.
Couldn't do you without a chance, Cody.
You'd have had the woman.
When he retired wealthy in 1962, he'd become one of the richest actors in Hollywood, having invested shrewdly in oil and real estate. His legacy as the quintessential Western hero endures, even as questions about his private life continue sparking debate among film historians.
Don't do it. Don't do it, Joe!
3. Van Heflin won an Oscar for Johnny Eager in 1942 and carved out a solid career playing tough, reliable men in westerns like Shane and 3:10 to Yuma. He projected blue-collar grit and moral fortitude, the kind of guy who'd back up the hero when things got bloody. Married twice with children, Heflin maintained a carefully constructed family man image that kept studio executives and audiences satisfied. Yet whispers persisted throughout his career about relationships with men, fueled by his frequent socializing within Hollywood's gay circles and close friendships with openly gay industry figures.
Senators, the issue before you and before the whole country is not my...
Colleagues described him as intensely private, even guarded, someone who compartmentalized his life with surgical precision. Heflin never addressed the rumors publicly, and no definitive proof emerged during his lifetime, leaving his sexuality in that murky territory where speculation and silence intersect. His performances remained consistently strong, delivering grounded authenticity, whether playing a weary lawman or a conflicted rancher facing impossible choices. When he died, suddenly of a heart attack while swimming in 1971, obituaries focused entirely on his craft, bypassing any personal controversy. Today, Heflin's work stands as a testament to understated excellence, even as questions about his hidden life remain unresolved and tantalizing.
We'll get you a new one of these. 18-karat gold if they make them.
4. Tyrone Power was 20th Century Fox's golden boy, a breathtakingly handsome leading man who dominated screens in The Mark of Zorro and Jesse James, effortlessly shifting between swashbucklers and westerns. With his chiseled features and athletic build, Power embodied heroic masculinity, and studios promoted him relentlessly as a romantic ideal women adored. He married 3 times, fathering children and maintaining a public persona that seemed unshakably heterosexual. But privately, Power engaged in relationships with men throughout his life, including documented affairs with actor Cesar Romero and others within Hollywood's discreet gay community. Friends described him as tormented by the disconnect between his public image and private desires, constantly fearing exposure that could obliterate his career overnight.
That's who I am, and I know all about you. You're not his wife, never have been.
Studio fixers aggressively managed his reputation, threatening journalists and paying off potential blackmailers to keep scandals buried. Power's performances carried an undercurrent of vulnerability and longing that made him more than just a pretty face, adding emotional depth to even standard action fare. Tragically, he died of a heart attack in 1958 while filming a dueling scene in Spain, collapsing at just 44 years old. His sudden death shocked Hollywood, and the secrets he carried died with him, preserved only in whispered anecdotes and cryptic diary entries discovered years later.
Word I say will take you farther.
5. Rory Calhoun. Rory Calhoun rode into Hollywood as a reformed bad boy with a criminal past, transforming himself into a rugged Western star in films like The Texan and River of No Return opposite Marilyn Monroe. With his towering frame and devil-may-care grin, Calhoun projected raw masculinity and working-class charm that made him a natural fit for frontier roles. Before Hollywood, he'd done time for robbery and car theft, a background studios strategically repackaged as evidence of his authentic toughness, rather than liability. Calhoun married twice and fathered 5 children, but building a wholesome family image that contrasted sharply with his outlaw origins. However, throughout his career, rumors circulated about affairs with men, including whispered stories from crew members and industry insiders who observed his behavior on location shoots.
Thank you.
You look good enough to eat.
Calhoun never addressed the speculation, maintaining strict silence about his private life while continuing to work steadily in westerns and action films. His performances delivered exactly what audiences wanted: unpretentious heroism, physical presence, and just enough danger to keep things interesting. By the 1970s, Calhoun transitioned to television, appearing in countless Western series before retiring comfortably. When he died in 1999, obituaries celebrated his survival story and longevity, leaving the unconfirmed rumors as footnotes to a complicated, resilient life in Hollywood's harsh spotlight.
Sure, that's the kind of guy I am. Any idea where they'll send you? There's new...
6. Madison. Madison became a heartthrob after a small role in Since You Went Away launched him to stardom, with his all-American looks landing him the lead in The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok, which dominated 1950s television. With his square jaw and earnest delivery, Madison embodied wholesome Western heroism, the kind of clean-cut cowboy parents wanted their kids to idolize. He married actress Gail Russell in 1949, a union that appeared picture-perfect in fan magazines but crumbled within 2 years amid whispers about Madison's sexuality.
You know, Bill, that Perry, he's never going to put on those...
Close associates and Hollywood insiders quietly discussed his relationships with men, including a long-rumored affair with director George Cukor, notorious for hosting gatherings of gay actors and artists. Madison never publicly acknowledged these stories, and studio publicity departments worked aggressively to maintain his squeaky clean image through carefully staged photo ops and wholesome interviews. His Wild Bill Hickok series ran for over 100 episodes, making him a household name and securing his place in Western television history. As the genre faded in the 1960s, Madison's career declined, and he eventually moved to Europe, appearing in Italian westerns and living more freely away from Hollywood's suffocating scrutiny. When he died in 1996, his legacy remained tied to that iconic TV role, even as biographers continued unearthing evidence of the private life he'd guarded so carefully.
Can I see you tomorrow?
7. Anthony Perkins. Anthony Perkins terrified audiences as Norman Bates in Psycho, but he also starred in several westerns early in his career, including The Tin Star and Friendly Persuasion, where his lanky intensity brought unexpected depth to frontier stories. Perkins projected nervous energy and psychological complexity, making even straightforward cowboy roles feel layered and unpredictable. He married photographer Barry Berenson in 1973 and had 2 sons, presenting a conventional family image that satisfied Hollywood expectations. Yet, throughout his life,
someday you're going to end up a success as chief clerk without an evening free. Look, if voice comes to...
Perkins struggled openly with his sexuality, engaging in relationships with men, including dancer Grover Dale and actor Tab Hunter, the latter detailed extensively in Hunter's autobiography. Perkins underwent conversion therapy multiple times, desperately trying to fix himself under intense pressure from studios and societal norms that deemed homosexuality a career-ending liability. His inner turmoil bled into performances, adding haunted vulnerability that made his characters unforgettable, whether playing a conflicted sheriff or a psychotic motel owner. Friends described him as deeply conflicted, trapped between his authentic self and the heterosexual persona demanded by his profession. In 1992, Perkins died from AIDS-related complications, a tragedy compounded by the fact that he'd hidden his diagnosis even from close family until the very end. His wife Barry spoke publicly about his struggles afterward, revealing the painful double life he'd maintained and the toll it had taken on his mental health and relationships. 8. George Maharis. George Maharis exploded onto screens in Route 66, the iconic road trip series where his brooding intensity and chiseled features made him a 1960s sex symbol. He parlayed that fame into Western roles, bringing method acting sensibility and raw charisma to genre films that benefited from his edgy presence. At the height of his popularity, scandal struck hard when police arrested Maharis twice for lewd conduct with men, once in 1967 and again in 1974. Incidents that shattered his leading man status overnight. Hollywood's ruthless machinery immediately turned against him, with studios canceling contracts and directors refusing to hire him for fear of controversy contaminating their projects. Maharis never publicly came out, maintaining silence even as the arrests became industry gossip and tabloid fodder that followed him for decades.
Last night when you looked out of the window, you looked up at the sky.
His career never recovered its momentum, relegated to supporting roles and television guest spots that barely utilized his considerable talent. The stigma of those arrests proved impossible to overcome in an era when even whispers of homosexuality could destroy careers permanently. Friends defended his professionalism and kindness, noting the cruel injustice of seeing such talent wasted because of societal prejudice and legal persecution. Maharis eventually retreated from the spotlight, living quietly and avoiding interviews that might rehash the scandals that had derailed his promising trajectory. When interest in his work resurged decades later, It came with recognition of how homophobia had robbed audiences of what could have been a legendary career.
Anticipate and prevent it.
Now, why would the city attorney want to prove?
9. Forrest Tucker. Forrest Tucker built a solid career playing tough cowboys and military men in over 100 films and the hit series F Troop, where his comedic timing revealed unexpected range beyond standard Western heroics. The standing 6'5" with a booming voice and commanding presence, Tucker embodied physical authority and masculine confidence that made him perfect for frontier authority figures. He married 3 times and projected an aggressively heterosexual persona, complete with well-publicized affairs and a reputation as a ladies' man that studio publicists happily promoted. However, beneath that carefully constructed facade, Tucker engaged in relationships with men throughout his career, including documented encounters that Hollywood fixers scrambled to suppress before they reached gossip columns. Associates described Tucker as conflicted, someone who embraced his macho image publicly, while privately pursuing desires that contradicted everything his persona represented.
Carl! Yeah?
The contrast created internal tension that occasionally manifested in erratic behavior, mood swings, and drinking that colleagues attributed to the stress of maintaining his double life. Tucker never addressed the rumors directly, instead doubling down on his tough guy image through increasingly aggressive public statements about masculinity and traditional values. His Western work remained consistently entertaining, delivering exactly the square-jawed heroism and physical comedy audiences expected from the genre's reliable character actors. When he died in 1986 from cancer, obituaries focused on his prolific output and versatility, leaving the contradictions of his private life unexplored in mainstream coverage.
I can't believe it! Wow!
10. Tab Hunter. Tab Hunter was 1950s, Hollywood's blonde heartthrob ideal, starring in westerns like The Burning Hills and Gunman's Walk, while Warner Brothers marketed him relentlessly as every girl's dream boyfriend. With his all-American looks and boyish charm, Hunter represented wholesome masculinity, the kind of clean-cut star parents approved of and teenagers plastered on bedroom walls. Studios arranged fake romances with actresses like Natalie Wood, carefully choreographed relationships designed to deflect any questions about Hunter's sexuality. In reality, Hunter was gay and involved in a long-term relationship with figure skater Ronnie Robertson, living together while maintaining elaborate cover stories for the press. In 1955, scandal nearly destroyed him when Confidential magazine prepared to expose his sexuality. But Warner Brothers negotiated a deal, sacrificing Rory Calhoun's criminal past instead to protect their bigger investment in Hunter's squeaky clean image.
Well, if you just give me a chance, Mr. Van Buren, just let me hit a few.
The close call terrified Hunter, who became even more careful about maintaining his public persona while continuing relationships with men in private, including later a partnership with actor Anthony Perkins. Hunter's career gradually declined as the studio system collapsed, and he aged out of juvenile romantic roles, though he continued working steadily in film and television. In 2005, he published his autobiography, honestly detailing his experiences as a closeted gay actor, finally living openly in his 70s after decades of secrecy. Hunter died in 2018, celebrated as both a Hollywood icon and an important voice in LGBTQ history, who helped illuminate the brutal pressures faced by gay actors during the Golden Age. Shi by Richard Cromwell. Richard Cromwell enjoyed brief stardom in early sound westerns, like The Lives of a Bengal Lancer, before his career mysteriously stalled in the late 1930s, leaving him relegated to minor roles and near obscurity. With delicate features and sensitive screen presence, Cromwell never quite fit the rugged cowboy mold, though he brought emotional depth to every performance. His most shocking moment came in 1945, when he married legendary actress Angela Lansbury, in what appeared to be Hollywood's most unlikely pairing. The marriage lasted barely a year before Lansbury sought an annulment, later revealing that Cromwell was gay and the union had been a Lavender marriage, a strategic arrangement meant to deflect scrutiny from both their careers.
He left me here, didn't he? He knew what they'd do. He wouldn't...
Cromwell never publicly discussed his sexuality or retreating further from Hollywood's spotlight and reinventing himself as a successful ceramicist, selling pottery and artwork instead of pursuing acting roles. Friends described him as gentle and creative, someone who found peace away from the brutal judgment and constant surveillance that had made his Hollywood years so painful. His brief fame became a footnote, overshadowed by Lansbury's legendary career and his own withdrawal from public life. Cromwell died in 1960 from liver cancer, largely forgotten by the industry that had once promoted him as a rising talent. His story, a quiet reminder of careers derailed by incompatibility with Hollywood's rigid expectations.
You didn't even have the decency to wash his face.
12. Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson was the real deal, a champion rodeo rider who became one of Hollywood's most authentic cowboy actors, winning an Oscar for The Last Picture Show, while starring in classics like She Wore a Yellow Ribbon and The Wild Bunch. With his weathered face and genuine horsemanship, Johnson brought unmatched credibility to Western roles, performing his own stunts and embodying the frontier spirit more convincingly than actors who'd never seen a ranch. He maintained an intensely private personal life, married to the same woman for over 50 years, and presenting an image of rock-solid traditional masculinity that matched his on-screen persona perfectly. Yet persistent rumors circulated throughout his career about relationships with men, whispers that never reached mainstream press, but remained constant undercurrent among industry insiders and crew members who worked alongside him. Johnson never addressed the speculation, maintaining such strict privacy that even close associates found him emotionally guarded and unwilling to discuss anything beyond professional matters. His performances carried a stoic dignity and moral authority that made him invaluable to directors like John Ford and Sam Peckinpah, who recognized his ability to ground even the most mythic Western narratives in authentic human emotion. When Johnson died in 1996, tributes celebrated his craftsmanship, integrity, and contributions to preserving authentic Western culture on screen. The rumors remained unconfirmed footnotes, overshadowed by widespread respect for his talent and the legacy he left as one of cinema's last genuine cowboys. The Wild West was never as straight as Hollywood sold it. These 12 men rode across our screens projecting unshakable masculinity, while hiding truths that would have ended everything. Some found peace, others faced tragedy, but all of them survived in an industry designed to erase who they really were. Drop a comment. Which of these stories shocked you most, and do you think modern Westerns would be better or worse if these stars had been free to live openly? Let's talk about it, because Hollywood's still hiding secrets today.